is not moved by accident. Nothing in the grand theater of politics happens by chance. Behind the flags, the speeches, the ceremonies, and the dazzling promises, there exists an undercurrent, a current so strong that it can shift nations, blind millions, and enslave the human spirit without a chain in sight. The hidden agendas are not whispered in the halls of power. They are orchestrated in silence, designed to shape the soul of a people while distracting their eyes with spectacles. If you would awaken, if you would rise, you must learn to hear not only what is spoken, but what is never meant to be said. There are forces darker than the night that dwell beneath the polished rhetoric of leaders. They prey upon human weakness, upon fear, upon desire, upon division. They wrap themselves in words like freedom and prosperity, yet their aim is not to liberate, but to tighten control. These forces feed not on truth, but on illusion, not on justice, but on manipulation. And you, dear listener, are not outside of this struggle. You stand in the very center of it, whether you acknowledge it or not. The first hidden agenda is the control of thought itself. It does not arrive with chains, it arrives with language. Words are the oldest weapons of war. Words can build cathedrals of hope or prisons of despair. In every generation, politicians discover the same eternal truth. If you can dictate the vocabulary of a people, you can dictate the boundaries of their minds. This is why slogans replace substance. This is why sound bites bury silence. It is easier to repeat than to reflect, easier to obey than to question. And when thought itself is narrowed, when citizens chant phrases they did not create, the dark force grows strong. Think about it. How often are you invited to think deeply about life, wealth, meaning, responsibility? And how often are you simply commanded to pick a side, wave a color, repeat a creed? A nation of thinkers is hard to govern, but a nation of repeaters, they are clay in the hands of any sculptor. You must decide. Will you be sculpted into someone else's design, or will you awaken and sculpt yourself into the image of your own higher calling? The second hidden agenda is the commodification of fear. Fear is currency in politics. Where there is fear, there is control. Look through history, and you will see it empires rising not because they offered peace, but because they offered protection from some enemy, real or imagined. The darker the force, the louder the warning. They speak as if the wolf is always at the door, and only they have the key to keep it out. But what they do not tell you is that the wolf is often invited, sometimes even created, to justify their own power. Fear paralyzes the will. Fear blinds the eye. Fear teaches men to bow when they were meant to stand. If you allow fear to govern your heart, you will be ruled not by leaders, but by shadows. And yet, here is a secret they do not wish you to know. Fear can be transmuted. Fear, when confronted, becomes courage. Fear, when questioned, becomes wisdom. Fear, when mastered, becomes fuel. The dark force feeds on your ignorance of this truth. But if you seize it, if you refuse to cower, if you declare within yourself that you will not be enslaved by the phantom of tomorrow, then their weapon falls powerless at your feet. The third hidden agenda is the illusion of choice. What good is a menu if all the dishes poison the soul? What good is an election if the hands behind the curtain have already decided the tune to which both candidates must dance? The great deception is to convince you that you are free because you may choose between two masks, while the same face lurks beneath both. And while the people argue over which mask is kinder, the face beneath grows fat on their distraction. Do not misunderstand me, choices do exist. But most choices offered are like painted doors in a hallway that all lead back to the same dark room. The real choice is deeper. It is not Republican or Democrat, not left or right, not conservative or liberal. The real choice is whether you will think for yourself, whether you will cultivate discipline in your mind, whether you will awaken your own conscience instead of outsourcing it to political idols. The real revolution is not at the ballot box, but in the inner chamber of your heart, where you decide, I will no longer be manipulated. I will no longer give my dignity to actors on a stage. I will live by principle, not by propaganda. This is the revolution that terrifies the dark force. The fourth hidden agenda is the glorification of division. A people united in thought, in purpose, in dignity, is a people too strong to control. Therefore, they must be divided. Divide them by race, divide them by class, divide them by gender, divide them by creed, divide them by any line that can be drawn upon the map of human identity. A divided people cannot see their true oppressor, for they are too busy fighting each other. And while neighbor hates neighbor, the puppeteer smiles in the shadows. Division is not only political, it is spiritual. It convinces you that your brother is your enemy, that your sister is your rival, that the stranger is your threat. But if you rise above the illusion, you will see all division is a veil. It hides the truth that humanity is one body, and when one part suffers, the whole body suffers. To believe otherwise is to weaken yourself. To awaken is to declare, I will not be a pawn in the game of hatred. I will not let others tell me whom to despise. I will live as one who builds bridges, not walls of suspicion. For the bridge is power, but the wall is prison. The fifth hidden agenda is the corruption of wealth. Money is not evil in itself. Money is a tool, a servant, a means by which vision becomes tangible. But in the hands of the dark force, wealth ceases to be a tool and becomes a chain. They whisper into the culture that greed is good, that success is measured not by the depth of the soul, but by the depth of the pocket. They build an economy not of service, but of exploitation, not of dignity, but of debt. And when a people forget that true wealth begins in the mind, begins in discipline, begins in the shaping of one's own spirit, then they will always look outward for treasure and never inward. That blindness is profitable for those who wish to keep them enslaved. But you, if you would rise, must remember, the greatest riches are not what you own, but what you become. The palace built on lies collapses. The empire built on greed burns. But the man or woman who builds a fortress of character, a kingdom of vision, a treasury of wisdom, such a one cannot be shaken. And in this unshakable strength, the dark force finds no entrance. The sixth hidden agenda is the destruction of truth itself. We live in an age where facts are drowned in oceans of opinion, where truth is traded like a commodity, where the loudest voice is mistaken for the wisest. To destroy truth is to destroy freedom. For a man without truth is a man without anchor, drifting wherever the current of manipulation takes him. Lies repeated long enough become a substitute for memory. And when memory is erased, when history itself is rewritten, then the people lose not only their past but their future. Yet truth is not fragile. Truth is eternal. Truth can be buried, but it cannot be killed. The task, then, is not to manufacture truth, but to clear away the rubble that hides it. Every man, every woman must become a seeker. You must sharpen your mind until it cuts through illusion. You must anchor your soul in principles that do not change with fashion. You must be willing to be hated for clinging to what is real, rather than applauded for bowing to what is false. This is the narrow path, but it is the path that leads to life. The seventh hidden agenda is the manipulation of hope. Hope is sacred. Hope is the fire that carries men through the storm, the light that pulls nations from the abyss. But when hope is hijacked, when it is redirected from God to government, from principle to personality, from eternity to temporary power, it becomes idolatry. And idols always devour their worship. Politicians know this. They do not simply offer policies. They offer themselves as saviors. They do not simply speak of progress. They promise paradise. And the people, weary and hungry, bow to the illusion. But no man can bear the weight of being your salvation. No system can carry the burden of being your eternity. When you place divine trust in mortal hands, you invite the darkest of forces to rule you. But hear me now. True hope does not come from Washington or Wall Street. True hope is born in the heart that believes in transformation, in the mind that believes in discipline, in the spirit that believes in its own God-given dignity. This hope cannot be legislated, cannot be taxed, cannot be stolen. This hope is freedom itself. And so, dear listener, you stand at the crossroads. Before you are the agendas that lead to shadow. Around you are voices that whisper submission. But within you is a power greater than all these, the power to choose who you will be, the power to change yourself, the power to live more positively, the power to rise above the games of men and the darkness of forces unseen. The shadow deepens when men forget themselves. For no agenda, however sinister, can rise in power without the consent of those who look away. Darkness does not conquer in a single blow. It conquers in the quiet surrender of ordinary lives, in the apathy of those who trade responsibility for comfort, in the silence of those who see wrong but dare not speak. This is the soil in which hidden agendas grow, the soil of distraction, indulgence, and complacency. And the first step to breaking their spell is to awaken the will to declare, I will no longer live asleep. Consider the subtle machinery of influence. News is no longer about truth. It is about narrative. Entertainment is no longer about art. It is about anesthesia. Social platforms are no longer about connection. They are about surveillance and control. All of these forces are interwoven with politics, woven like threads into a net that drags the human soul into captivity. And yet, the net is fragile if you learn to see it. For the power of the net lies not in its strength, but in your blindness to its existence. Once you see the strings, the puppet show loses its magic. Once you see the hand that moves the shadow, the illusion dissolves. But seeing is not enough. Many see and despair. Many see and sink deeper into cynicism, believing that because corruption exists, hope does not. This is yet another trap, another layer of the agenda to make you believe that your voice is powerless, that your life cannot shine against the night. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every great turning point in history has been lit not by masses, but by individuals who refuse to bow. One awakened soul is more dangerous to the dark force than 10,000 sleeping citizens. For when one light is kindled, it exposes the darkness, and others begin to see. This is why you must tend your inner fire. Discipline is no longer optional. If you live without structure, the structure of hidden agendas will claim you. If you think without clarity, the words of manipulators will shape your mind. If you drift without purpose, the tides of politics will carry you where they wish. But the man or woman who wakes at dawn with conviction, who orders their thoughts as a warrior, sharpens their blade, who feeds their spirit with wisdom instead of noise, such a one becomes untouchable. For they no longer need to be governed from without. They are governed from within. Attitude then becomes your fortress. A positive mind is not naive. It is revolutionary. To see clearly the darkness and yet refuse to surrender your joy, that is rebellion. To believe in possibility when all around you cry despair, that is warfare. For positivity is not denial of reality. It is the refusal to let reality dictate the limits of your vision. The agendas of shadow thrive on hopelessness. For a hopeless man is easy to enslave, but a hopeful man a joyful man, a man who rises each morning believing there is meaning in his steps, such a man cannot be purchased, cannot be bribed, cannot be broken. Think also of the power of your words. Communication is not a luxury, it is a weapon. When you speak truth in a culture of lies, you strike fear into the architects of illusion. When you encourage another soul to rise, you plant a seed that may grow into a forest of resistance. Do not underestimate the conversations you have at the dinner table, at the workplace, in the silence of friendship. These are the places where culture is shaped, where truth is either transmitted or strangled. Choose to speak life, and you weaken the dark force. Choose to remain silent, and you strengthen it. But communication must be rooted in courage. Too many speak only when it is safe, when the crowd applauds, when the risk is minimal. Yet truth is most needed when the crowd jeers, when the risk is high, when the cost is real. Remember the prophets, the reformers, the dreamers who stood against empires. They were not safe. They were not popular, but they were free. And freedom is worth more than applause, worth more than comfort, worth more than life itself. Now, let us pierce deeper into the nature of wealth. For here lies one of the greatest manipulations. Wealth, in its purest sense, is the multiplication of life, the ability to create, to serve, to expand the horizons of human possibility. But in the language of politics, wealth is reduced to currency, digits on a screen, numbers that rise and fall like tides manipulated by unseen moons. This is the grand deception, to make men chase numbers rather than purpose, to make them worship paper rather than cultivate spirit. Do not fall for it. Money is a servant, not a master. It is a tool to be wielded, not a god to be worshipped. If you build wealth without building wisdom, you are constructing a palace on sand. But if you build wisdom, discipline, generosity, and vision, wealth will follow like a shadow that cannot leave your side. The dark forces know this, and so they tempt you to shortcuts, to greed, to envy. Resist them. Build yourself, and the outer riches will take their rightful place as tools, not chains. Let us speak also of self-discipline. Without it, you are prey. With it, you are predator not of men, but of excuses, of weakness, of mediocrity. The hidden agendas thrive on your lack of discipline. They hope you oversleep, that you scroll endlessly, that you indulge without reflection. For the more chaotic your inner world, the easier you are to govern. But when you discipline your time, when you command your thoughts, when you master your appetites, you become a fortress. You become untouchable to the manipulator. For he cannot bribe the man who has mastered desire. He cannot tempt the man who has conquered himself. C.S. Lewis once reminded us that the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turning. So it is with the agendas of politics. Rarely do they arrive as tyrants. More often they arrive as caretakers. Rarely do they demand change. More often they offer comfort. Rarely do they announce war. More often they promise peace. And so the people sleep, and in their sleep they are led into captivity. Wake, therefore, before the slope becomes too steep, before the chains too heavy, before the night too dark. What then shall you do? You must become light, not the light of shallow optimism, but the light of fierce conviction. Not the light of blind denial, but the light of courageous truth. Light that exposes, light that heals, light that guides. For darkness cannot be fought with darkness. It flees only before the steady flame of those who refuse to bow. And the question that remains is not whether darkness exists, it does, but whether you will be one of the few who carries the torch. The tide of history does not wait for the hesitant. Every age has its moment of reckoning, its moment when men and women must decide whether to rise in truth or collapse into shadows. And today, In this age of glittering illusions and carefully crafted agendas, the weight of that choice has never been heavier. You see, the dark forces do not march openly. They whisper in policies. They disguise themselves as progress. They wrap chains in velvet and call it safety. They have learned that the most effective prison is not made of iron, but of ideas that bind the will and lull the conscience into silence. And yet, within you burns a power greater than their schemes, the power to awaken, to choose, to live by principle, even when the world staggers in confusion. Let us reflect on the nature of mindset. For here lies a battlefield more important than any election, more decisive than any law. A man's mind is the forge in which his destiny is shaped. If you surrender your thoughts to the narratives of fear, division, and scarcity, you will live as a pawn, forever reacting, forever dependent on forces beyond yourself. But if you discipline your mind to dwell on vision, responsibility, and purpose, you will live as a creator, a builder, one who bends circumstance to serve destiny rather than surrendering destiny to circumstance. This is why the dark forces invest so much in controlling what you see, what you hear, what you believe. For if they can plant despair in your thoughts, they can harvest obedience in your actions. Mindset is not a matter of motivational fluff. It is warfare. Every morning you wake to a battle for your attention. The moment you open your eyes, the agendas seek to claim your imagination. They flood your devices, they clutter your schedules, they seduce your appetites, and most men surrender before they rise from bed. But the awakened soul does not. The awakened soul declares each morning, my mind is mine. My day is mine. My destiny is mine. This declaration, though silent, shakes the very foundations of manipulation. For the moment you reclaim your thoughts, the chain is broken. Yet mindset alone must be partnered with action. The hidden forces laugh at good intentions. For intentions without discipline are like seeds never planted, they rot in the hand. Action is the fire that transforms thought into reality. But not all action leads to freedom. Action directed by distraction is slavery. Action rooted in vanity is emptiness. Only action born of principle creates strength. This is why you must measure your days not by how much you entertain, but by how much you are transformed. Not by how loudly you argued politics, but by how deeply you mastered yourself. Not by how far you wandered in distraction, but by how firmly you advanced toward your higher calling. The agendas of division, corruption, and illusion seek to rob you of this higher calling. They want you busy, but not purposeful, loud, but not wise, informed, but not awakened. And so you must ask yourself each evening, did I live today as a master of myself or as a servant of their design? This question is not comfortable, but it is essential. For the man who dares to ask it will begin to see where his chains remain, and seeing is the first step to breaking. Let us move into the realm of character, for no weapon forged against you is as powerful as the one you forge within yourself. Politicians may craft laws, corporations may design systems, media may weave illusions, but none of these can conquer the soul that has built its fortress on truth. Character is not formed in ease. It is hammered in trial, tested in solitude, proven in silence. The dark agendas fear nothing more than a generation of men and women whose inner compass points to truth regardless of cost. For such souls cannot be bribed, cannot be bought, cannot be broken. Think of it. What if a nation measured success not by the GDP, but by the growth of integrity? What if citizens were taught not merely to make a living, but to make a life of honor? What if wealth was pursued not as possession, but as stewardship? The dark forces tremble at such a vision, for it cannot be controlled. A people of character do not beg for freedom, they embody it. They do not wait for leaders to deliver justice, they live justice. They do not cling to idols for hope, they become beacons of hope themselves. This is the revolution that begins not in parliaments, but in hearts, not in capitals, but in living rooms, not with ballots, but with choices made in the quiet chambers of conscience. Now, let us not deceive ourselves. The path of awakening is costly. To resist the agendas of manipulation is to invite resistance, ridicule, and rejection. You will be called naive, extremist, even traitor. You will be told to conform, to be reasonable, to bow for the sake of harmony, and many will surrender at this point, preferring the comfort of slavery to the discomfort of freedom. But you who hear these words, you who feel the fire rising in your soul, you are not called to comfort, you are called to truth. And truth has never been welcome in the palaces of power. Truth has always dwelt in the wilderness, in the voices of prophets, in the hearts of those who refuse to bow to idols. So then, what is required of you? Faith, courage, perseverance. Faith that though the night is long, the dawn is certain. Courage to speak when silence is demanded. Perseverance to endure when others fall away. For the hidden agendas are not defeated in a day, nor are dark forces banished with a single speech. They are weakened each time one soul refuses to play their game. Each time one citizen lives with dignity. Each time one family chooses to rise above division and embody unity. These small victories accumulate, and in time they topple empires. And let us not forget love, not the shallow love of slogans, but the fierce love that sees through deception and still chooses to serve. Love is the greatest weapon against the politics of hate, for hate divides while love unites. Hate blinds while love reveals. Hate enslaves while love liberates. To love in an age of agendas is not weakness, it is rebellion. To forgive in an age of vengeance is not surrender, it is victory. For the dark forces cannot comprehend love. It is the one force they cannot counterfeit, cannot corrupt, cannot control. Therefore, live as one who refuses the script. Write your own story, not with ink, but with the choices you make each day. Refuse to be a pawn in their theater. Refuse to let fear dictate your steps. Refuse to let division define your neighbor. Build your wealth in wisdom, your strength in discipline, your freedom in truth, your legacy in love. And when you have done this, you will have already overthrown the agendas of shadow, for they cannot govern the man who has mastered himself. Then let us press deeper, without pause, without hesitation, for the hour is urgent, and the words must cut through the fog like a sword of fire. The agendas we have spoken of do not live in isolation. They weave together into a single tapestry designed to suffocate the soul of man. Control of thought, the manipulation of fear, the illusion of choice, the glorification of division, the corruption of wealth, the destruction of truth, and the perversion of hope, each thread binds tighter when woven with the others. But remember this, a tapestry of lies can be torn by a single hand of truth that refuses to let go. The hidden power in politics is not what is written in law, but what is written in the imagination of the people. Laws can govern bodies. Imagination governs destiny. This is why propaganda is more potent than policy, why stories are more dangerous than speeches. The dark forces understand this. They do not only want your taxes, your votes, your compliance, they want your dreams. If they can convince you to dream small, to think that greatness is reserved for elites, to believe that wealth and success are locked behind gates you can never touch, then they have conquered you without firing a shot. You will never rise higher than the ceiling you accept. And so, they build invisible ceilings of class, ceilings of race, ceilings of gender, ceilings of despair, and the people walk with bowed heads, never realizing that the ceiling was never real. But hear this truth. You are not bound by ceilings. You are bound only by your consent to them. The same God who breathed galaxies into existence has breathed into you the spark of creation, the ability to think, to act, to shape reality itself. Do not let any politician, any pundit, any agenda convince you otherwise. You are not a pawn in their game. You are a king in your own kingdom, a queen in your own domain. If only you dare to rise and claim it. Yet claiming it requires war, not with weapons of iron, but with weapons of the spirit, clarity of thought, discipline of will, courage of heart, integrity of character. These are not abstract virtues. They are shields and swords in the battle against manipulation. When you refuse to be baited by fear, you disarm their weapon. When you refuse to be divided by hate, you dismantle their strategy. When you refuse to sell your conscience for wealth, you expose their emptiness. And when you dare to hope beyond their promises, you render their illusions powerless. But let us not be deceived into thinking this war is fought only on stages and in streets. The greatest battles are fought in kitchens, in living rooms, in the solitude of your own mind. When you teach your child to think, you strike a blow against the control of thought. When you encourage a friend not to bow to fear, you undermine their manipulation. When you choose integrity over compromise at work, you declare independence from their corruption. When you refuse to gossip, to hate, to despise your neighbor, you sever the chains of division. These are small acts, unseen by cameras, uncelebrated by crowds. Yet they are the foundation of a revolution no power can stop. The agendas of darkness thrive on mass hysteria, but they tremble before individual awakening. For once the individual is awakened, he becomes contagious. One candle can light 1,000 others without losing its flame. One truth spoken in courage can echo across generations. One act of defiance against corruption can inspire nations. Do not underestimate the power of your solitary stand. It is the seed of movements, the beginning of revolutions, the whisper that grows into thunder. And yet, you must beware another danger, despair. For when you begin to see the machinery of manipulation, the temptation is great to believe all is lost, that humanity is doomed to chains, that darkness has already won. This, too, is an agenda, a final trick of the shadow, to make you surrender hope before the battle is even fought. But despair is a lie, a counterfeit dressed as realism. For history bears witness that empires fall, tyrants crumble, lies collapse, and light rises again and again. The question is never whether darkness will pass, it always passes. The question is whether you will stand until it does. So, then, how shall you live? Live as a builder in an age of destruction. Live as a thinker in an age of slogans. Live as a peacemaker in an age of division. Live as a seeker of truth in an age of lies. Live as a man or woman who refuses to bow to idols, who refuses to be bought, who refuses to be silenced. Let your life be a sermon louder than any politician's promise. Let your actions preach freedom more convincingly than their speeches preach slavery. Let your discipline, your vision, your courage become a beacon that no darkness can extinguish. And as you live this way, remember that wealth, real wealth, is not measured in accounts, but in impact. Not in possessions, but in principles. Not in fleeting comforts, but in eternal legacies. When you enrich others with courage, you are rich. When you sow discipline into your children, you are rich. When you build bridges across divisions, you are rich. When you cling to truth, though the world mocks you, you are rich. Such wealth cannot be stolen, cannot be taxed, cannot be corrupted. This is the wealth the dark forces fear, for it cannot be controlled, and it multiplies in silence until it overtakes the noise of their illusion. So rise, you who listen, Rise from apathy, from fear, from despair. Rise as one who knows that hidden agendas cannot enslave a soul that has chosen freedom. Rise as one who knows that the darkest night is powerless against the smallest flame. Rise as one who knows that the future does not belong to the schemers of politics, but to the dreamers of vision, the doers of courage, the builders of love. For though the agendas of men may be hidden, the agenda of God is not. It is written in your very being to live free, to live true, to live with purpose. And no force of darkness can erase what has been written by eternal hand.